Jonathan, thank you so much for making time today. Today we're talking about one of the biggest things going on in retail, which is probably one of the oldest things that's been going on, which is EDI. And I'm
Yeah.
talking with one of my favorite companies, Orderful. So thanks so much for making time. Do you just want to give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Glad to hear we're one of your favorite companies, Aaron. We love working with you as well. I'm Jonathan Kish. So I currently run the business development team at Orderful that includes channel and software platform partners. Before that, spent the majority of my career at tech supply chain companies. So think like stamps.com, Octane. And before Orderful, I ran the BD team at Chippo from Series B to Series E and helped them pivot from more of a UI-based product to an API-first product. But this was my first foray into real B2B and just learning about all the challenges. And it's been a wild ride.
Cool. I'm sure you've got quite a few stories from Shippo. We'll get those another time, I'm sure. I want to start with just a lot of the brands that we work with are new to retail and don't really know what EDI is, let alone how to spell it. And so I'm wondering if you just give us a brief overview of what EDI is and what the history is behind it.
Yeah. So the way I learned it, right, is businesses send and receive data a couple different ways. The majority of the ways that businesses send information is still like legacy: phone calls, fax, email. I think it represents like 80% of business interchanges that exist. So that's one way. The other way is APIs, right? The way that we sent carrier information at Shippo, the way Orderful sends EDI information via our API, that's a more favorable way that businesses communicate. And then you have this other way, this legacy way, like you said, which is EDI. I think it was actually developed by the U.S. military in the 60s. It's just another way for businesses to send and receive data. The value of it for very large enterprise companies is that it's incredibly secure, and their entire backend, right, their ERP, their core infrastructure is built around being able to receive EDI data from their trading partners, and so that's why it exists today still. Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that EDI was. Is it more secure than API, or it's more secure than a phone call or an email?
I think I'm not an EDI like evangelist on itself, right, as a form of communication, but I think the main value it has is it is more secure. And because of the testing process that trading partners go through during the EDI lifecycle, both parties know that the data they're sending and receiving, in theory, right, should conform to their backends and be able to be accepted by both parties.
Right. Can you talk about how it works?
Yeah, great question. At high level, right? So you have the concept of a leader, right? And it could be a supply chain leader. So think Koch Brothers Logistics and all of their carrier followers. It could also be a retail leader like Walmart or Amazon. And what they do is they publish their own guidelines. And these are unique EDI requirements, essentially. Now, the weird thing about EDI is that Target's guideline is different than Walmart's, which is different than Home Depot's, which is different than Lowe's. No two EDI guidelines are the exact same, which is also, as you know, Aaron, one of the problems. Like if you're a developer who's used to working in X12, there's nothing repeatable about it to make you better the next time you onboard a new trading partner. So we have the guideline concept. And then you have the follower concept. And these are manufacturers, wholesale trading partners, drop shippers, 3PL, who need to receive orders, right, or order information from those leaders, potentially fulfill or ship if you're a carrier on the KBX model, ship if you're like a 3PL, drop shipping for a brand, for Nordstrom, for example. And this information gets sent and received via a communication channel. So Walmart drops their order in a van, and then via EDI, either a provider, self-service, or through a company like Orderful, you pick or push that order up from the communication channel, and it gets added to your backend ERP, OMS, IMS, whatever you're using. And in and of itself, like, it sounds complex, and it is, but the real difficult part of EDI is before anyone can begin trading with those leaders. You have to take that guideline, you have to integrate it to your back end, and you have to go through the testing process with the trading partner. And Aaron, you know this, it's asynchronous. It's payload screenshots that are sent and received, or you're waiting for human beings on the other side to respond. And that's the main problem with EDI, right? Is you're looking at anywhere from 4 to heck 20, 24 weeks to go live with legacy providers.
Yeah. Did there used to be a single standard at some point, or is it always that Walmart thinks they're better than Target, and Target thinks they're better than pick a retailer?
Well, there's a bunch of, so X12 is what, for the most part, North America uses on EDI. In Europe, it's Edifact, and in the UK, it's TradeComs. Now, through the years, there's like hundreds of versions of X12 that have come out. I don't think it's as much that Walmart thinks they're better than Amazon. Walmart built their business on their own EDI standards, right? So think of their $1 trillion supply chain that they've built over a 50, 60, 70, 100-year period. And all of that's built on EDI information flowing between warehouses, between accounting systems, routing decisions, right? So their guideline works because their business is built on the information coming in the way they need it to run their business. And the same thing is true of Amazon, same thing is true of Target, and down the line.
Got it. So, an oversimplification for EDI, at least how I think about it, is you've got the retailer that, the leader that basically makes a template and says, here's the template, here's how I want you to work with me. It's your opportunity it's your responsibility to manage to that template, to integrate and to make sure it works. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment, right? I don't think there's a lot of empathy from a leader on their trading partners. It's kind of like they control the relationship, right? So it's inventory if it's the big retailers, it's demand if it's a supply chain company. You're absolutely right. It's kind of like, hey, here's our guidelines. Email us when you're ready to test.
Yeah, you're lucky to be working with us.
I wouldn't say that, but it's more of a email us when you're ready to test.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So sometimes people will hear folks throw out numbers like 940, 856. What do they mean by those?
Yeah. So like there's hundreds of like, those are called transactions, EDI transactions, right? And each of them means something different. So if you take like a 940, for example, it's just a warehouse order. So it's a way for a manufacturing or retail or brand to send ShipBob, for example, the order that they've received from Walmart that ShipBob has to essentially, like ship on behalf of the customer. And then I think you mentioned 856, like an ASN, right? Advanced Shipping Notice. That's what a ShipBob or a ShipMonk or a Shipping Tree would send the brand, retailer, manufacturer, their customer, to let them know what they actually picked, packed, the tracking number associated with it, so that they can then forward to the retailer and know the order's on its way. But all of those numbers, they're just a transaction, and each transaction has a meaning, right?
Yeah.
The 800 series is usually retail, dropship, asset-based 3PLs. The 200 series is a lot of supply chain. Yeah.
Is it such that a 940 always means warehouse order, but the schema or the template across the retailers is different, but everybody always calls it 940? They know what it is. Is there standardization to that level?
Yes. So you're right. So a 940 means a 940 to every single company that uses it. The information in the 940 is, like you said, the schema is what changes on a per trading partner basis.
Got it. Is most people will use and be familiar with EDI when it comes to retail transactions. So these big providers that everybody tries to get into. Is EDI useful or used in other applications or channels outside of retail?
Oh yeah, like and so full disclosure, we are strongest as a company in retail and supply chain. So let's touch on that second one. Think of like freight, LTL, truckload brokers that send and receive load tendering, shipping updates. All of that is done via EDI. I had no idea about that before I joined Orderful. The healthcare industry runs a lot of their claims process on EDI. The financial industry sends and receives a ton of information over EDI. It's something like, I think in the US, a $50 billion industry. and it's growing at 20% year over year. But yeah, you're right. Like we know it mostly in the 800 series and retail.
Yeah. So a bank could, in theory, get a 940 and scratch their head.
Yeah, they'd probably have a separate right document. I think there's an 832 in healthcare for it's actually an insurance claim. But yeah, anybody could receive the data via EDI if they'd like.
Yeah. So, my understanding is that EDI is technology that came out, call it the 70s, right? You said 60s and 70s. That's when it was adopted. And, computer science has advanced beyond that to where APIs are now the preferred standard. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between an EDI protocol and an API protocol?
Well, it's the standard. It's the standardization of them, right? So, the example that I always give is anyone could take a look at at Shippo's shipping API, right? And within a day, start printing a label and using UPS or FedEx immediately. There's no like rigorous process. They've been able to standardize all of those carriers across, an end user who's using them, right? Um, EDI, like I said earlier, is specific. They're point to point relationships between customer and trading partner. Now, I think another way you kind of could ask your question is why does it still exist, right? And it exists because of the billions and trillions of dollars that the enterprise leaders have put into building their entire supply chains around this protocol. And then there's like a chicken and an egg thing. So if Walmart needed their 100,000 suppliers in the US to trade EDI, those suppliers have built their business on X12, right? And so now when they go to offshore some of their business to maybe like a ShipBob, for example, as a 3PL, they say, hey, ShipBob, our entire business now runs on X12 because we do Walmart Target. I need you to accept data via EDI. And so like you have the leaders who've built everything around it and their followers who have built their businesses around it because they rely on the leader side of the business.
That reminds me of the story that I saw of basically people asking why are train tracks, I think, 4.5 feet long. I don't know if you've seen this online going around, but the width of a train track is because that's the same width of what carriages were, and the same width of carriages were because that's what the roads were, and the roads were because that's what chariot was, and the chariot was that wide because that's what two horses side by side were. And so you have all these kind of legacy things that just kind of keep going, and it sounds like for better or for worse, we're stuck with EDI. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're building a business on that idea, but we're also building it on the data, right? So, like I said, when I first got here at Orderful, I had the same opinion that you did. This was anytime you brought up EDI to anyone, they just had a visceral look of pain on their face. But until you like dive into the numbers that the industry is growing from 5 to 20% year over year, depending on the category, that's not a dying protocol. And then the other thing, the reason I think, you mentioned at the beginning of the call, everyone is talking about it is because I think of what's happening in the economy over the last 2 years. So when I was in the direct to consumer world, it was a very valuable time to be in the direct to consumer world. Everybody was buying from digitally native brands on Shopify and BigCommerce on WooCommerce. Well, in 2022, that was no longer the case and money was tighter around the world. And when money's tight, where do families buy? They buy from Target, they buy from Walmart, they buy from Walgreens. And all of that is built on EDI. So those companies that wanted to reach direct to consumer on their Shopify store need to find other avenues to be able to essentially stay in business. And those avenues are B2B, and the way B2B is sent and received is EDI.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that D2C is where you build your brand, but retail is where you build your business. And so many brands that we're talking to today are just, if they weren't in retail, they're talking about how they're going to get there, and just the economics are so different. Kind of as a side tangent, if you and I were to start a retailer today, and we have the scale and we could do it, would we be forced to use EDI, or could we say, you know what, we want to take an API regime, and we're big enough that eventually people will give up their EDI addiction and they'll spell a different three-letter acronym?
Yeah. So I think like maybe if we had started Huckberry, if you're like familiar with that marketplace, right? Like they're my favorite marketplace to shop online. So when you look at like when you go to their store, you see that like CC Filson, for example, is a company that they sell a lot of stuff. Peak Designs, right? A lot of those like those brands, but specifically with Filson, if they're going to trade with someone, it's most likely going to need to be EDI to receive that order. And so we could pivot and say, hey, all of our suppliers, you just accept Jonathan and Aaron's API, and that's how you're going to trade with us. Except we don't want to hamper our ability to expand our business. And if we want to work with suppliers or wholesalers that have diverse products, that have great unit economics, we've got to be able to have our own X12 standard, in my opinion, to scale the business.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll come back to the EDI API kind of trade-off here in a moment. But I want to go deeper into retail because we mentioned that EDI is used for a lot of different things, but retail is what you and I are most familiar with. Can you just talk a little bit how the EDI regimes differ across retailers?
Well, I think what you said in the beginning is true. So the document types, the 800 series, are going to be common across everyone you get a purchase order for, that you do drop shipping, right, for. The differences start at that requirement. So again, we call them guidelines. Each retailer is going to have a separate guideline. And then what follows from the guidelines is what we talked about earlier, the communication method. So for instance, Costco sends their EDI information to what's called a van. And that's how their suppliers have to pick up the EDI data, whereas other companies use AS2, others use SFTP. It's all based on whatever the retailer wants. From there, what has to happen on a per trading partner basis, as you know, is a mapping process. The legacy way of doing that is using an EDI mapper and a developer every single time. And then finally, you have to go through what we talked about earlier, the testing and validation process, where you're getting final sign off from Walmart or Amazon to go live with the trading partner. And in each step of the way, there's challenges associated with that process, right? And to kind of get into it, so first of all, the guideline. These are PDF documents. So they're not digitized anyway.
Big PDF documents.
Very large, huge files, right? And so how people have historically solved this is either using like a managed service provider, where that's a black box, or using an EDI mapper. But to use an EDI mapper, you have to employ a developer on your side who understands X12, right? Because they have to take that PDF document and then they build a custom map that's specific to Jonathan and Aaron's business and Walmart. And so that's taken us anywhere from, let's call it 1 to 3 weeks to build that map. Our developer at our company hands it over to our EDI analyst to send that information to Walmart. And it's a payload screenshot or just a payload in an email. And then what happens, because Walmart gets hundreds of thousands of messages a week during their EDI process, it sits in their inbox for a week and a half, right? And then a week and a half later, they respond. And because that data was built on a PDF document that our developer just figured out, there's anywhere from 3 to 13 errors in it, right? And Walmart sends us back the document with the errors. Our EDI analyst goes to our EDI developer and they said, hey, you have to fix X, Y, and Z, maybe pounds instead of ounces or vice versa. Well, obviously, that's another week and a half to 2 weeks for the developer to update the custom code, only to send another payload screenshot to the EDI analyst, which has another error. And on average, what brands have to go through to go live with a trading partner is getting 3 to 12 errors during the testing process, which take around a week and a half to 3 weeks to resolve. So that entire, soup to nuts process that we just described, from mapping to being able to eventually get the final structural validation sign off from the trading partner, you're looking at 12 to 20-ish weeks, depending on who the trading partner is. It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, and that's assuming that you've got people who are paying attention, right? I mean, folks on the brand side who are working on EDI implementation, they get other jobs, right? And so if they miss an email or they don't read as close as they should have, that can only get longer. I remember the first time I helped onboard a brand onto Target, I was surprised that there were 2 rounds of testing. There was round 1 to say, yep, we got the connection, but then you had to go through a whole other portal, a whole other protocol to make the connection live to actually get live orders. And so there's a lot there that's just very nuanced and is just different from retailer by retailer.
Well, and think about like, and you did this probably on behalf of a brand, right? You've got their business team yelling at you because they're
Yeah.
so excited. They have a new relationship that's going to turn on revenue for their company. And now they're looking at your company to say, what is taking us so long? Right. And it's hard to explain the process to somebody who doesn't know it. And there's a lack of accountability across the space. And it puts people, who do the EDI integrations on behalf of customers in a really bad spot because the job responsibilities are not very clear throughout the entire process. That's another thing that could be painful for folks.
Well, adding up all of the headache there and the cost to do the integration work, at the end of it, you have massive fees or penalties potentially
Yes.
if it's not done well. And so, I heard, I think it was Target, but they were going to charge a brand $10,000 for every PO they had to reissue. And so it's like, this PO could be worth 80K, and if you are not set up to ingest that order and to process it and send things back because the testing wasn't done correctly or because something changed on your side, you can get hit with this massive fine. And so it's just this bad situation that could only get worse.
Yeah, what you're describing are chargebacks, right? And these large retailers have teams of people that are managing their chargeback process because, like you said, that $10,000 charge from Target, it's not a surprise at all. These companies make millions of dollars
Yeah.
on their trading partners not being compliant, which, as we've gone through together with a couple of customers, is one of the main benefits of Orderful because we're a product that like can structurally validate data before it's sent and you can catch errors in real time. Our customers don't have chargebacks, right? So, solving that issue for customers starts making sure that the payload is actually accurate when you send it to one of your trading partners.
Yeah. So you touched on it quite a bit, but when it comes to the overall onboarding process for a brand, what are the distinctive phases that you look at? I mean, let's suppose we start from the perspective of, hey, I'm lucky enough, I just got accepted into Target, and they say, cool, we want to transact via EDI. What do I do? What's the first step, and then kind of what should I expect along the whole testing process?
Yeah. The first step is asynchronous. It's emailing Target to get the PDF guideline from them. Then there's the map building process. That's taking their guideline and adding it to your ERP. That either
And
has
that's where I could outsource that piece of it to a company like Orderful or other folks out there, right?
yeah. So well, the way that it would work with everybody else is you could outsource that as a managed service, or you can use other tools to build the integration. How it would work with Orderful, right, is instead of needing to do one-off integrations on a per trading partner basis, you as a brand or as a development partner would just build to our API once per document type that you trade, and then you use that same schema to add trading partners down the road. So engineers are completely removed from it with us.
Got it.
Then you look at the next phase. Um, we talked about that guideline requirement with everybody else. Like, so you've built this payload that we don't know if it's valid at all uh, by yourself or with one of the legacy providers. With Orderful, the cool thing is we validate what that customer what that leader is telling your brand to send them in real time. So if the Home Depot is asking for ounces instead of pounds, you see it in our product. And a business analyst can reference in the guide where the mistake actually occurs and what needs to be corrected. And via the click of a button, they can correct that mistake and it'll apply to their back end integration to Orderful. And so that's the cool process. So when our customers go through testing or when our SI partners on behalf of our customers go through testing, they've already structurally validated the data. And so when they send it to a Target or a Walmart, they don't have those 3 to 13 errors that occur with everybody else. They just wait for a response that you're good to go, which unfortunately, by the way, still takes about a week and a half for them to respond, which is why it takes us about 9 days to go live with a trading partner.
Gotcha. Okay. What kind of testing should I expect to do with a retail partner?
It's a mix of development testing, so making sure that the payload that you're sending on behalf of your brand or that your brand is sending is accurate so that Walmart can actually ingest it. But it's actually then conforming it to a NetSuite or an Infor or a Dynamics, right? Because the data in and of itself That's not how brands run their business. They run their business on a back end. And so it's both making sure the leader can ingest the data that you're receiving, but also making sure that your ERP is sending and receiving the accurate data as well. And that's the internal engineering event. And the communication, again, is usually done from like an analyst standpoint or an EDI developer.
Got it. This EDI provider relationship seems to be pretty important. And I'd love to kind of walk through and just understand that both from your perspective and the market in general. So could you talk a little about, what does the cost structure for EDI providers typically look like? How do those economics work?
Yeah. So the legacy providers are all over the place, right? And it's a mix of transaction-based pricing. So we talked about those documents before. A lot of providers will try to just say, hey, it's 50 cents, 75 cents, $1 a transaction. And, when customers hear that, they're like, oh, that's nothing. Except, when you're sending and receiving 5,000 to 7,000 transactions per partnership per month, at 50 cents to $1 adds up. And so a little bit more on the unpredictable side. Then you have the actual trading partner fee, right? So the one-to-one relationship is a software fee that a lot of providers will have. You have the cost to actually communicate with the leader. That's called managed testing. That's another fee. It's a professional service fee. And then finally, that information needs to get from the retailer's communication method to your ERP. And so you usually have to pay somebody to do that for you. And so there's usually 4 costs, right? Transactions, trading partners, the actual integration, and then the managed testing.
And if I'm a brand, what's the range of these bills? Are we talking dozens of dollars a month, tens of thousands of dollars? A lot of that sounds like it's going to be based on volume, but just if I'm assuming that I'm doing $1 million a year with orders in Target, how much should I expect to be spending in EDI?
Yeah, I think on a per trading partner basis, you could easily expect between $4,000 and $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 for each integration, depending on how many transactions there are. And then obviously the additional cost of managing the errors that occur in that relationship.
Okay, so about 1% of retail spend.
Yep,
roughly.
that's fair.
Okay. You mentioned, kind of the transactions and it being a little bit fuzzy on exactly what people are paying for. What are some of the common gotchas that exist in the industry where people either get locked into something for longer than they expected or ends up just costing more than they thought?
Well, I think the main gotcha is that transaction-based pricing. So again, put ourselves in the seat of the brand. Like, we started our business on Shopify. Like you said, that's where you start. We had a great 2021, great, a good first half of 2022. It took us 6 months to be able to get in their store, in Target stores. So now we have this. We're super excited. We just want to get started with an EDI provider as quickly as possible. So we'll call a legacy managed service provider because they're the name that everybody knows. And they'll sell us a very perceivably low cost service up front. And they'll say, hey, we're going to take care of everything. We're going to manage your entire process for you. Unfortunately, what happens there is the cost unpredictability. So as you end up sending and receiving more documents, you end up paying thousands of dollars for each integration a year. And then secondly, managed service companies are professional service companies disguised as tech, right? And so you get put in a queue with hundreds of thousands of other customers and you wait until they have the resources ready to build your integration. And so that is why the thing that nobody tells you is it's going to take us about, 10 to 20 to 25 weeks to do this integration, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody would ever buy those services, right? And those are the two common gotchas, is the time and the cost.
Okay. Yeah, I know of one brand that structured a deal where it was percent of revenue. It seemed pretty good when they were pretty small, but now they're writing checks of 6 figures every month.
I've heard of those deals. I like, good on the companies, right? The provider negotiated them. I think I've heard of one this week actually, but yeah, I don't know that those would be around if they listen to the podcast we're on today.
Yeah, that's the PSA. If you have a deal like that, that's an anomaly. That is not normal
Yeah, yeah.
look for the exits. Really good deal for the managed services company, but pretty raw deal for the brand.
Pretty raw deal for the brand. Pretty raw deal for the brand.
Yeah. How do EDI providers differentiate themselves? And maybe you could talk a little about kind of the big ones out there: SPS, TrueCommerce, Spice. Those folks you hear a lot about, and you maybe talk about how they compare and contrast with one another, and then how Orderful is a little bit different.
Yeah. And by no means am I the EDI gospel on the space, but this is how I break it down. So you have the EDI mappers, right? This is like Boomi, this is MuleSoft, this is Steady. They're developer tools, and they're really great EDI mappers. They are a little bit more cost effective, right, when it comes on a per integration basis for the software. But what it doesn't, come with is any ability to scale, right, and or speed up the trading partner process. Then you have the legacy managed services.
What do you mean by that? What are the limitations for why they can't scale or why you can't scale?
Because when you're using a legacy mapper, you need an engineer to build a custom integration between Target and your company every single time. So think of it as if you're a 3PL. There's nothing reusable if I'm using a legacy EDI mapper between my Target integration and customer one, but my Target integration and customer 2, 3, 4, 5, let alone the hundreds of retailers that are out there. But what they do give you is the ability to do that work. And so, and especially with some of the iPaaS players, they can roll that up into their broader business. And sometimes it can be commercially attractive to customers, right? Then we have the managed service company. And they essentially take what the EDI mappers have done and they do it on behalf of customers. And their real value prop, at least from what I understand, is telling customers, hey, you don't want to be an EDI. You don't want to have to worry about it. The downside to that, though, is you get put into a queue with all of their other projects. And, this, right? Like, you need to be able, if you're a professional service company, to give a white glove service to your customers because human beings are human beings. There's only so many developers out there. And so where they fall short is on the time. And then you mentioned Orderful. How we're different is I think we're the best of both. So you do build an integration to Orderful, but instead of on a per trading partner basis, you do it one time per document type that all of your trading partners have. You add trading partners to your master schema for the 856, for the 940, with a business analyst, not a developer. And then because we're actually taking all of these guidelines from the major retailers or the major supply chain companies, and we're digitizing them and putting it in our product, either our customers or our development partners can, like we said earlier, correct the mistakes in real time using our rules engine, validate the data that the retailer is asking them to send, and cutting down the testing process, which is the actual pain point of EDI. And so with us, like, our core value prop is speed. It's all over our website. On average, it takes our customers 8.6 business days to go live. But they're able to do that because they don't need an engineer to stand up the trading partner, and they validate the data in our product before they start testing with the leader.
It's almost as if your solution allows who was traditionally a follower in the EDI relationship to become a leader, to say, here's how I'm going to interact. And then, effectively what you guys are doing is translating. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. And companies like yourself and our brands love us because we're going to give you the EDI information in JSON, right? So you don't have to be an expert in X12 or Edifact. You just need to be able to read and write to our JSON API, and we'll do the heavy lifting for our customers.
That's cool. That's super cool. I appreciate that framing. That's helpful. It's kind of the builders are almost like it's building blocks, and you have to build the tower of Legos each time a little bit different. The managed service is someone who's playing with the Legos, and then you guys are like, forget this. Like, I don't want to play Legos. Like, you're going to work toward what I want to do. So that's an interesting piece.
Yep.
How hard is it to change EDI providers? I know a lot of times there's so much pain and effort that goes into getting these relationships set up. And even if you're not thrilled with your provider, even if you think you're paying too much, because of all of the pain that people had, there's reluctance to change it, especially if it goes wrong. Then you actually have sales and revenue coming through that pipeline now, and so you don't want to damage it. So just talk a little bit about how hard is it to change, both from a provider perspective as well as from a retailer perspective.
Yeah, I think from that question is such a great question. It's like any type of software that you've implemented as a business that you're not happy with, right? Where we may have done this historically, and it was a lot of work, but it's working, right? And so it's not worth call it 2 to 10, 14, 16 weeks to rip out my code and replace it. But why companies like Orderful have taken off is because every time a customer either migrates from QuickBooks to NetSuite or NetSuite to Infor, you need to update your EDI information. And so you have to either go through that entire painful process with your existing provider again, which now you have the experience and it's less than perfect.
You know it's not going to be fun.
It's not going to be fun, right? Or you can use a modern platform like Orderful where it'll be at least fun. And so you have to do that work anyway when you migrate. With us, it's about 2 to 6-ish weeks to build the initial integration, so not a super heavy lift. And then, like I said, think of it as around 10 days per trading partner with us to do it.
Okay, that's helpful. So if you're looking for recreational integration work, go to Orderful. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Although we have great partners today like you.
Yeah. Can you if I'm a brand and I'm trying to, how do I know if I have a good EDI provider or not?
Yeah, I think the first thing is when you send them an email, how long does it take them to respond? If it takes more than a day, you should ask questions. The second is, do they have a product that I can log into to see the actual EDI data? So if I know that an order hasn't come through from Walmart or the information is not valid, can I log in somewhere on my own to see what the mistake is so that we can fix it and accept this order in enough time before they choose another supplier? The third, and this is what I would ask myself, do I have a full-time staff that is managing my EDI process? If the answer to that is yes, that's not necessary in my opinion, right? I think if you're a brand, you should focus on building the best brand. You should focus on marketing. You should not take those like super valuable resources and dump it into something that, like we've talked about, is something that's either solved from companies from Orderful or is a legacy experience. Yeah, those are kind of the things that I can think top of mind.
So in other words, just to kind of take what you're saying, but reverse it. If you're a brand, you ideally want nobody managing the EDI process. Like you basically want alerts and tools that are going to tap you on the shoulder when something's wrong, and then you need to either have somebody who's extremely responsive or the ability for you to self-service and resolve those issues when they come up. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a fair way to put it. And let me add one more thing. I think like if your commercial team comes to you and they say, we just got a new contract with Nordstrom, your reaction as a business should not be, this is going to be painful. This is going to take us time. If that is what you're feeling, you have the wrong EDI provider.
No, that's helpful. One thing I'll hear a lot from brands when they are, they get that first sell into Target or Walmart, and they're learning how to spell EDI, and they've got this list of providers, and they're thinking through there. Some brands are very reluctant to go with an EDI provider that's not on a retailer's approved list. And my understanding is that there's hundreds or thousands of people on there, but typically if you talk to a broker, they're going to name one or two that they've kind of worked with. Is this? I guess two questions: is this approved list thing a real thing, and how hard is it for a retailer to bring on a new EDI provider?
No, that's just a scare tactic from the legacy companies, right? So on the side of a trading partnership, there's the leader and the follower. The leader has their own supply chain or their own EDI provider. So for Home Depot and for a lot of those legacy retail companies, it's a company called Commerce Hub, or a more modern version, Miracle, right? They handle the supplier onboarding. They are their essential EDI provider, right? but each of their suppliers has their own EDI provider that they use or manufacturer they use to onboard to that leader. Yes, they will have to contact your commerce hubs of the world if you want to trade with Home Depot. But a supplier is in my opinion incentivized to use any provider that helps them trade the fastest. So yeah, I've heard that. That's just like, I don't know. It's just I don't have time for it.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't really. I guess it makes sense, but I had assumed that when Walmart said here you have to integrate to our EDI process, and they have their EDI portal, those were Walmart employees and Walmart tech. What you're saying is that Walmart has agreed on a protocol, and they have another company that is basically managing that relationship. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, for a lot of them now, Walmart specifically, I don't know who their EDI provider is, but like again, Commerce Hub exists, and they have a lot of the market because they do this for brands. Like some companies have their own teams that do it, but at the end of the day, they're just asking you to pick up the EDI document on whatever communication channel they need it to be, right? And then how you send it or receive it is up to the follower.
Yeah. So if I am this is really interesting to me. So if I am, let's use your Home Depot example. If I'm going through the onboarding process with Home Depot, am I talking to a Home Depot person or am I talking to a Commerce Hub person?
You'd be talking to a Commerce Hub person.
Interesting. Who basically is appearing as Home Depot.
No, I don't think. Well, we've onboarded, and by the way, Commerce Hub again, great company for what they do.
Yep.
We when they don't appear as Home Depot, they're acting with Home Depot, right? Like they're their supplier onboarding portal. The same way on the supply chain side for Koch brothers, we are the EDI platform that all of their carriers use to onboard with them, right? But we don't say to their carriers, you have to not use Kleinschmidt anymore. You have to use Orderful. No, like as a carrier, you can use whoever you need. We hope it's Orderful, but we are representing KBX in that scenario.
Got it. So that may be why if you are doing the onboarding with a big retailer and you ask the retailer which one they should use, that's why potentially some legacy providers are at the top because they're working on the other side of the transaction.
Yeah, and it's a scare tactic. I've heard it. It's just not real. If you are a retailer and what we're saying is not accurate, please reach out to me. I can be a learned man sometimes.
Yeah, this is the great EDI conspiracy of 2023. Well, cool. So let's just kind of round things out. So what does the day-to-day look like once I have an EDI provider on board? I've integrated, I've tested, I'm shipping things back and forth. What should I expect?
Well, when it's with Orderful, you should expect no headaches, right? So you should expect that data to be sent and received seamlessly without you knowing about it. Now, if there is a production error, hopefully you're using a modern company that sends you updates when something goes wrong so that you can fix it. But those are few and far between, right? You can imagine, like we've talked about a lot of the companies, those retailers don't just change their guidelines like at a whim because it affects tens of thousands of companies. But yeah, ideally 99% of the time after you've integrated to a company like Orderful, you're not thinking about the EDI provider in the background. Your ERP is just successfully sending and receiving the data. And when an error does happen, you know about it in real time when you use us.
How often are there EDI failures? Should I expect like one out of every 1,000,000 transactions, or what do you guys think?
I think like it and I hate this answer, but in EDI, it's common. It all depends on the trading partner, the leader. But one out of every 100,000, like with Orderful, like we would expect there to be very, very minimal, right? Sub 0.001%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there some trading partners that are more error prone than others?
I'm not going to call them out on the podcast, but yes.
The answer is yes. All right. With my past history, I can probably venture a guess. Maybe I'll send to you afterward. What causes these EDI errors?
Well, it could be something like, so again, everybody is building a guideline on, in North America, the X12 standard. But like we saw it recently this week, they could have built a bad guideline, right? So they may have built this X12 standard around something that's not X12, which
Mhm.
could cause an error down the line in the mapping process for our customers. A guideline could change, right? So there is scenarios where there's a change and customers don't get notified. Um, Communication methods could go down. So if you're using kind of a legacy van to send that data, and they're not built on a modern cloud system, they have a lot of outages that can happen. Yeah, those are the three main ones, but they're not super common, at least in our world.
Got it. What do you do when that happens? How do you fix it? Is it getting on the phone with the trading partner? Is it just restarting and pushing refresh?
How we fix it is either our customers or a company like ISPA just goes into your Orderful instance. You see the error and you correct it. Now, you may have to get on the phone with a trading partner if for some reason like we don't know what's happening. Um, but at the very least, you'll see the message in real time of what's going wrong, and you'll be able to correct it. How other companies would have to do this is, you'd have to contact your EDI provider because you don't see the code, you don't see what's going wrong. They would have to look into your integration to see what's happening. They would have to then contact the retailer on your behalf. It's a game of telephone at that point.
Gotcha. Well, good. Well, this has been super fascinating. So, anything else about EDI or Orderful that you want to share?
No, same fun conversation. It's a space that the more you know about it, the more you continue to say like, I can't believe it's done that way, but it is, and it's refreshing, to work for Orderful, right? Where we're trying to solve this the right way. It's in the bones of our business, right? Like our CEO Eric Kaiser, he built these integrations out of college for 5, 6, 7 years. He started his own system integrating business, so he put in his 10,000 hours. He knew the pain points of mapping and testing, and he built the perfect solution.
No, that's great. Yeah, one of the things that I think this conversation changed my opinion of is I had just assumed that EDI was kind of on its way out and that everybody was eventually going to move over to APIs. And that's where it is. But I'm not so sure anymore. It sounds like 100 years from now we may still have some version of EDI and hopefully maybe different solutions on there. But that protocol seems like it's pretty well entrenched.
We are betting on it.
Yes, you are. Well, good. Well, Jonathan, if people want to learn more about Orderful or get in contact with the right way to do that.
Yeah, contact us for them. We always love to hear from partners and prospects, or you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Love to make new connections in the space. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, pleasure to have you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, my friend.